Oh, hi. Today I want to know, how do I make up new football chants? I'm Cross JLo and welcome to A Wonderful Waste of Time, and what some of you may not know is I'm actually somewhat of a musician. Not much of a pianist, but I thought it'd be a lot of effort to bring a drum kit in here. You might not also know that I'm kind of into sports. I'm definitely more of a nerd than a sports person, but I like ice hockey, tennis, skateboarding, and football. And those two things are often brought together in team-based sports, as fans sing and chant in support of their team, or against the other team, or their own manager, or the referees, or sometimes just the ability to watch back a video of what just happened. The best at this, at least in my opinion, are football fans. Every team from a local to a global scale takes part in this odd musical culture, and there are some interesting and unique sounds to be found along the way. So in this episode I'll be looking into the music, finding out what can be done better, and I'll be making up some chants of my own. But first we need to look a little into the history, because where did all this come from? Football, also known as soccer, the beautiful game, reverse handball, and of course, nifty kick time. A sport in which 11 people try to catch a slightly bouncy sphere inside a large net, but the twist is, the net stays in place, so they have to try to lure the ball inside it, with the threat of weaponised leg-based assault. There are many old games that are quite similar and certainly involve kicking a ball into a thing, such as the ancient Chinese sport of Kuju, which dates back to about 440 BC, though it likely existed longer than that. It also exists in many other cultures in different forms, such as this stone tablet depicting a Roman guy doing kick-ups. But the game as we know it isn't quite that old. The modern version of the game is based on the one created at Cambridge University in 1848, when they sought to unify the varying rules in different public schools across the UK, so that all of these posh lads could play together. Though it wouldn't be very surprising to find out that there are a lot of other versions being played, just not by people who happen to be rich kids in fancy boy schools. The rules changed over time, modernising and spreading into the global phenomenon it is today, becoming the most popular sport in the world. If you don't count running, which is involved in most other sports including this one, and that you sometimes have to do if you're late for like a bus or you're being attacked. Sports. And for as long as the sport has involved teams based around schools and towns, there's been some level of pride in rooting from the people that just happen to be from your local school or town. So what better way to show your support than with a jaunty tune? But when did someone first decide that everyone should have a little sing-song in the stands? Well, the oldest song still in use is On the Ball City, which is sung by Norwich City fans. But it wasn't actually written for the club, having been written in the 1890s, with the club founded in 1902. Here's the song. If you're into football but from outside of the UK, you may only sort of know who Norwich City are, as historically they're one of those teams that sort of flits back and forth between the Championship and the Premier League. But you may remember them for having what is, in my opinion, one of the best badges. Look at this happy little guy! The canary with the use of the bright yellow and the dark green has got to be one of the most aesthetically pleasing designs in all of football. Kit-wise, I throw it up for the Kaiser Chiefs, the recent Nigeria kits, and biased opinion, but Arsenal's Blue Lightning kit. But I can't think of a better looking badge. But this is about music, so let's get back on track. The song's certainly old-fashioned, but it's hard to argue with the fact that it's a genuinely original song, something which a lot of modern chants can't say. A little before this, there was another football-based song. It's certainly not something I've ever heard chanted in a stadium, but it's incredibly well known, at least here in the UK. Originally titled the Dooley Football Club. Sorry, Scotland, just trying to see how it's spelt. The song had a couple of lyrical changes to become more comedic, and was eventually renamed Football Crazy. A version of the song was released in the 60s, which was used on several TV shows in the coming decades, and made the song incredibly popular. This is arguably a genuinely great song. It's incredibly catchy, it's very singable, and because the chorus isn't about a particular team, it's pretty universal. The only problem is, this version is just about someone really liking football. It's so universal that it would be weird to sing it for a specific player or team, and it's better left to just be about football fandom. There are more known to have existed, and there were probably songs for as long as people have been playing football, but lots of them are now just songs without lyrics and lyrics without songs, and there are plenty more that were just completely lost to time.
Team name. Team name.
Football, in a lot of countries, but definitely here in the UK, has a reputation for hooliganism. Because what better way to celebrate your team's accomplishments than by starting fights, harassing the general public, and kicking the shit out of a bus stop? People can be so intense about their football fandom that they lose all sense of personality and become complete arseholes in support. Or so they say, because I highly doubt that genuine love of a team has the same effect as that blue shit from Zootopia. Yep, that's right. I managed to work a movie about talking animals into this episode. I can guarantee you that the people who are really into hooliganism happen to fall into one of two categories. People who are just bastards all the time who happen to be being bastards about this right now, and timid, snivelling little scaredy boys who get to feel real big and strong when they're with the bigger boys who happen to agree with them. The psychology of fandom has many facets, and this might all sound very negative, but I just want to get it out of the way so we can focus on the good stuff and why it helps this episode. Because the majority of football fans aren't like that at all. So hooliganism aside, the concept of mob mentality has its uses outside of being a mob. It's rare that song breaks out outside of a theatre, yet thousands of mostly adult, mostly men can go from being a bunch of drunk, rowdy, pie-filled lads into a scene from High School Musical. And this weird innate ability for someone to start a song and then have a group of people with the population of Monaco all join in is weirdly beautiful. Granted, not so much when it's something mocking, gloating, or just overtly racist, but with the right tune and the right mood, it can genuinely be pretty nice. But if they could stop loudly singing on public transport after the game is finished, that'd be great. I mean, everyone on the London Underground spends their entire time trying not to make too much eye contact with each other, but let's have a load of sweaty drunk people fill up one carriage and have an old-fashioned sing-song. One thing that I find interesting is an audio phenomenon that, as I can't find a proper term for it, I'm going to call unified voice. It's the concept that many people all talking or singing at once can still be characterised with an accent or cadence based on the many unified voices put together. This means you can often tell who a group is comprised of based on hearing them all talk or sing at the same time. For example, listen to this clip. Then compare it to this clip. The first clip was Celtic fans, but you probably already knew they were Scottish even if you didn't recognise the colours, because you can hear the accent of the group. You might even have picked up that they're majority Glaswegian. You can hear it in the way that certain words are pronounced. For example, how head is pronounced heed.
Instead of the word head, you would hear
Heed.
head.
Heed.
Compare that to the second clip where they have a strongly different accent. The Arsenal fans have a predominantly London accent, which you can hear in the dropped T in the word undefeated. Undefeated. Undefeated.
Heed.
Undefeated.
Heed.
It's completely illogical that every Celtic fan in that crowd has the exact same accent, the same way it's completely illogical that every Arsenal fan in the other crowd has the exact same accent. But when you hear the group talking as one, the predominant sounds push through. You can also hear in those clips that, as I said earlier, it's mostly adult, mostly male voices. But we know from looking at the crowd or just general logic that it's not exclusively adult men. But the group's voice is swayed in that direction because it's what most of the crowd is made up of. For comparison, here's a much more mixed group all singing Bohemian Rhapsody while waiting for Green Day to perform at Hyde Park. You can hear in this group that there are much more varied voices and a much more even split. Not just because there are multiple voice types, but you also get a much richer sound that spans multiple octaves in a pretty amazing harmony. So why am I talking about all this in this episode? Other than to trick people into learning some psychology I find interesting? Well, there are plenty of people out there who wouldn't feel comfortable singing in public. They also probably wouldn't feel comfortable singing on stage or in front of a camera, and maybe don't think that they would enjoy singing along with everyone. Similarly, there are plenty of people out there who are more than happy to sing as loud as possible, even though they're completely tone deaf and couldn't hold a note if you handed it to them on a piece of paper. But all of this goes out of the window with unified voice. It just takes enough people to sing it pretty well that all of the bad singers and the rough parts from the pretty good singers all just fade away into the one voice. Which is why the singing of a large group of people, which should probably sound awful and cacophonous, often sounds pretty good.
Team name.
Despite everything I just said, musicality is still very important. The crowd might be able to make up for a few less good singers, but if everyone's singing badly, then it's all gonna sound bad. This is often a problem in people not getting the foundations of a song right to begin with, and then other people copying their mistakes. Occasionally to the point where people don't even recognise the original song and only know it as a chant. Take a listen to this example of a song I've heard a lot of crowds sing. So even though I've heard that a bunch of times, I had no idea what song it was supposed to be until researching for this episode, when I found out that supposedly they're singing Sloop John B, an old folk song from the Bahamas that was repopularised in the 60s when the Beach Boys covered it on their album Pet Sounds, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest albums of all time and a perfect album. In fact, I have it right here, and it's one of my favourite songs on the album, and I've listened to it so many times, but I still had no idea that that's what they were singing. So why is that? Sure, the lyrical changes don't help, especially when the original lyrics are, I want to go home, let me go home, I want to go home, not just I want to go home over and over again, but it's more in the tune and the pacing. This, in sheet music, is a rest, as in, give it a rest, you're singing the next line too quickly, you tuneless bell end. And they're very important in music, because they're one of the things that give a song timing. Without variations in note lengths and the use of rest, it's like a sentence without any grammar where you never take a break so it removes any emphasis, and it's very hard to understand what's being said because it's not in easy to process chunks, and also it's very hard to take a breath so it's hard to talk for a very long time in such a long sentence. So if the Sloop John B chant was sung with better timing, not only would it be more obvious what song it was supposed to be, it would also be easier to understand the lyrics. Not that the lyrics in that chant are particularly hard to understand, but it applies to all music, and seems to be a common problem in other chants, like when people do Guantanamera. Now, I say this knowing full well that football fans aren't there for the music, they're there for the football. But going back to the idea of unified voice, it's really interesting to hear the difference in rhythm and general musicality between a group of football fans and a group of music fans. Compare the previous examples to this clip of a crowd in Scotland chanting at a Joey Badass gig. Joey fucking Badass! Joey fucking Badass! You might not notice a huge difference right away. They actually sound quite a lot like a football crowd, and from the way that they're chanting, I wouldn't be surprised if whoever started it was a football fan. But take a listen to this clip from later on in the same video. Their chant is so in time that it's essentially a metronome for an interesting improv part of the performance where they set the pace for the band and Joey starts freestyling on top of it, even working in the chant as a chorus. Now I can't say with any certainty that this is genuine and that there wasn't a plant in the audience who's done this at every gig of that tour, but if it is genuine, it's really impressive. You can actually set a metronome to the crowd's chanting. For a great example of why timing can be really important in chanting, and why I feel it can create a really big atmosphere, we're gonna have to take a look at Iceland. You might remember when Iceland got into their first major tournament at Euro 2016. The reason you might remember it is because they knocked England out of the tournament, which wasn't great. But the other reason you might remember them is because of this badass shit right here. The first time I saw them do this, it was a moment of genuine awe. It's just really cool. It's incredibly well planned and it's weirdly intimidating. It's called the Viking Thunderclap, or Volcano Clap, and all it needs is one person with the drum to do the dum-dum, and then everyone else claps and goes, huh! It's really simple and really effective. I feel like it must also mess with opposing teams' heads a little bit. They get progressively faster as they do it, which builds up the tension. But they start so slow that it must throw off their pace psychologically. While simple, this style still requires everyone to have their timing down. It wouldn't be anywhere near as impressive sounding if everyone was out of time with each other. Which is also why there's a lot of videos of them practicing it, because it was so important to them to get that timing right. I also think it's very impressive that this chant's so memorable even though it doesn't have lyrics. So if you're looking to write your own but you struggle with writing the words, maybe you don't even need them. This also makes it more universal, so it doesn't matter what country they're playing against, the message is still very clear. Though there is a downside to this. As with many things that are really cool and really easy to understand globally, there's gonna be imitators. That is embarrassing! That is embarrassing! So, one last thing before I debut the chants that I made up for this episode, which will all hopefully turn out to be pretty good. They are. Not to pick myself up too much, but they're pretty catchy. I think you're going to like them. There's a lot to question when it comes to originality in football chants. The idea of making something genuinely original is great, but it's a big undertaking, and it can be a hindrance to not have a familiar tune. But I'd really have to argue that there should be some level of originality. It's kind of sad when people take something original like the Viking Thunderclap and just rip it off. It's great that people like it, but Iceland doesn't have a huge history of success in football, so just let them have their cool thing. You can make up something that's similar, just make it different. And isn't everyone a bit tired of hearing the same chants that every team uses? Where the team's name is completely interchangeable and it's based on some old song that no one would sing outside of this scenario. I mean, are people still getting hyped up to sing a parody of On a Bicycle Built for Two? Really? So I really don't think you need to come up with something that's entirely original. It's great if you can, whether that be a whole song or just some small thing that's unique to your team. But I do think we can move on from recycling the same songs over and over again. There are 97 million songs documented in the world. Surely we can find something better to sing than She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain. You could even try doing genres that have never been done before, or writing a song for a player who does good things but never gets songs written about them because they're not goal scorers. So why not just pick a popular song that you like and rewrite the lyrics to be about the team that you support or your favourite player? Throw in a couple of football terms like kick, goal, fox in the box, and see what happens. You might even end up with a lot of people singing it with you. So, it's a few weeks later because I'd originally planned to have people react to these, which didn't really pan out. But that just means that you can give them a rating. So watch through these chants and give them a rating out of 10 in the comments and tell me what you think of them. And if there's someone that you want to see react to this, just send it to them. So now that I know what makes a good chant, it's time to make some of my own. By which I mean I've already written the songs, it would be pretty impractical to do it now. I've also tried to fulfill some of my earlier suggestions, so there'll be a couple of songs in more out there genres, and a couple that aren't just about scoring goals. I also wanted to try and be positive, so none of these are particularly mean, maybe a little bit in the last one, but it's more about making catchy stuff that you can go and sing. Also, if you're going to play along, please try to just mark them as the chants themselves. Don't mark stuff down because you dislike the player or the team that they play for. So before we get started, let's remind you of what we're trying to beat, because your bar's going to be set pretty low after you see this video.
Fight and win! Fight and win! Sorry, dude. Get over it. Come on, Seattle! Come on, Seattle! No, you gotta your eyes open. Fight and win! Fight and win!
The look in his eyes as though he's doing something great and world-changing makes my body recoil in on itself like the house at the end of Poltergeist. And let's not talk about the interview where he for some reason does an English accent. It's all oof. Just big oof. So again, biased, but there are a few Arsenal ones in here, and we're going to start with a couple who've become recent heroes. In fact, the first one is a song that I made up before I came up with this episode. I just realised that their name fit really well with the song and it got stuck in my head. So hopefully, this is a good start. So that was more of a classic one, just taking a popular song that's probably well known by the most common demographic of football fans. So I'm pretty happy with that one. The lyrics are a little bit weirdly worded because it was funny to me, but I think it focuses on what he's good at. Since I wrote the chant, he's scored quite a few more goals, but at the time he was more about setting them up, and I think that's something that should still be celebrated. Remember, let me know what you think in the comments and give them a score out of 10 as we move on to everyone's favourite man with a Tesco's bag who's also pretty good at setting up goal scoring opportunities. Similar idea with this one, older song that's probably more well known, but it focuses more on the fact that he can play well at both ends of the pitch, because the man is just a menace with his shirt tucked in. There's a bit of timing in there that's a little unusual, so it might take a bit of practice for a large group to get it right, but I really think that if they did, it would sound pretty great. Next, we're going to get into some more themed ones. I asked my most football-obsessed friend, Nathaniel P. Garfield, a couple of questions about underrated players who deserved a song. So we start with a simple, just the most underrated player, to which he replied Southampton's James Ward-Prowse, a player I'll admit I didn't know that much about, but after watching some highlight reels on YouTube, I can see why he picked him. Frankly, Another banger. I feel like I'm doing pretty well so far with fitting people's names into lyrics, and I like that I managed to work in his signature golf swing. Next, I wanted to do something for a goalkeeper, as they're less likely to get songs, because people are often more focused on the players scoring goals. Now, I fulfilled my Arsenal quota with the 2 earlier and 1 coming up later on. Otherwise, Aaron Ramsdale deserves some kind of grand ballad the way that he's been playing recently. But we're going to go with another one chosen by my friend, and another very worthy choice. I'm not 1000% on this one. I like it because it's based on a song that I like, but it is a bit slow. Though it might sound better if it was actually sung by a crowd, rather than me with a load of voice effects trying to imitate the sound of a crowd. For the record, while I'm not a phenomenal singer, I did layer in some voices that weren't quite as good to sound a bit more laddish and realistic. So just imagine that when I'm really trying, I've got the voice of an angel. Next, I asked my friend for a player who really deserves a song, no matter how popular they are, just someone really worthy of a good song. But the player that they chose is someone I already wrote a song for who's coming up in a little bit, so I had to pick someone else. I thought about it a little while and just kept coming back to the same idea, as there's a player that's done so much good stuff off the pitch that they deserve to be celebrated regardless of how they've been playing. You probably already know who this is going to be.
He can get those kids their dinner. He can score goals. He's a winner. Number 10, number 10, number 10, number 10. He gives more than he's been earning. Finds the kids running. Number 10, number 10, number 10, Marcus Rashford, Marcus Rashford, Marcus Rashford, is number 10.
Another one based on a classic rock song, so not really out there in terms of genre, but our next view will cover that well. It was interesting looking up clips of Rashford doing charity stuff. I feel like people talk about a lot of the stuff that he's done, but there was plenty more that I didn't know about. So I'm very happy to write a song for someone who's trying to do good stuff, because there are plenty of sports people who make a fortune playing a game for a living, and they're just like, "Hey, look at my mansion. Check out my big ass watch. I've got 6 sports cars and I use one of my sports cars to drive from my mansion to the rest of my sports cars, because I like cars and I play sports." So fuck those people, and good for Marcus Rashford. I've seen a lot of people complain about him and sideline all the charity work that he does, but most of those people complaining aren't doing good things for people and aren't professional footballers. So maybe delete your Twitter until you can get some perspective. Anyway, on to the genre ones, and we're going to start with one that's as far out there as possible, because as we know from our earlier research, most chants are based on really old songs, classic rock and pop songs. But have you ever heard one that's a bossa nova? Probably for good reason, but why not give it a try and see what happens? And if you don't know what bossa nova is, it's that music that you imagine being played in a lift. but if you look for the really good stuff, it is really good. Shout out to the band Nouvelle Vague. And before you see this one, I'll admit, yes, I did pick the player just because their name fits really well. Look, it fits. That's pretty good, right? It might not be the most singable thing you've ever heard, but if a large crowd of people sang it, it would blow people's minds. It's just so weirdly calming. I think there's some psychological warfare in this one, but I don't see anyone giving it big scores in the comments. Our penultimate song, and we've hit the trifecta, is an Arsenal player, the final person that was chosen by my dear friend Jimmy Footballs, even though he supports Spurs, so I'm really glad he didn't make me do a song for old Big Bird. And it's an R&B classic that I dare anyone to say isn't a great song. People sing at practically every football match, but are they dancing? Because I feel like this is the one that's going to get people genuinely into it. Quality song, quality player. Hopefully you also think it's a quality chant, because it's probably the one that I'm most proud of. Also worth noting, Bukayo Saka is probably the easiest name to fit into a song. It's 5 syllables, easily split into 3 and 2, and each syllable starts with a hard consonant, always making a staccato. Ba 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 ba, Bukayo Saka is perfect. Even if you don't like my one, he easily fits into so many songs. You can take Happy by Pharrell and just change the Because I'm Happy to Bukayo Saka. Na 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 by the Kaiser Chiefs is easily Bukayo Saka. Do 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 Bukayo Saka. At one point, I was writing his chant to the tune of Get Into My Car by Billy Ocean. Get him on the ball, do-do-do-do-do-do, Bukayo Saka. There's loads. Seriously, just pick a song and see if you can fit his name into it. It works great. And lastly, we have one that's going to really push the boundaries. Made for a player who's very well respected and always reminds me of the Milky Bar Kid. The man's 30 and he still looks like he delivers newspapers by bike. He once grew a beard and somehow looked younger. He's the player that I refer to as the Drongan Smith Rowe, though apparently some of his teammates call him the Ginger Pele. And what better and more fitting musical choice to make for this player? Someone with a long-standing, well-respected and very successful career, and the kind of song that would be appreciated by the fans that love him, than to pick that most beloved of music genres. Disney. So, I think that's proof that it doesn't take a musical genius to make up new football chants. In fact, it's mostly just rewriting lyrics, so if you've ever written a song before, it's pretty easy. All it takes is a basic understanding of music, which I think a lot of people have, and you to care enough to write it. Then you've just got to convince other people to sing it, and when you hear a huge crowd of people singing it, you can say, I wrote this, and no one will believe you, so get proof. Document every idea you have, it's the only way to be safe. So go write your own songs and see how it goes. And if you write something good, let me know. If somebody makes something because of this episode, I want to hear it. Also, if you like this video, please share it. There are 100 videos on YouTube titled American Watches Europe's Most Insane/Funny/Outrageous Football Chants, and all they did was watch some videos for 10 minutes, which is fine, but I actually made up some chants that you can go and sing. For further research, check out Brett Domino's How to Make a Hit Football Anthem. He's a musical comedian who makes several guides on how to make hit pop songs on YouTube, but this one is about football, so it's pretty useful if you're interested in this specific topic. You should also check out Bob Mortimer and Andy Dawson's podcast Athletico Mints, which isn't necessarily about football every episode, but at least a bit of it is each podcast. But if you're a fan of Bob Mortimer as in Vic and Bob or the fishing show that he does with Paul Whitehouse, go and listen to this. It's prime Bob Mortimer. He's super weird. It's very funny. And while it feels weird to shout out something owned by Apple because they do not need any more help in advertising their products, if you own Apple TV, watch Ted Lasso. It's incredibly funny, it's incredibly heartwarming, and I wish I knew several of the characters from it in real life. It's genuinely such a charming and pleasant show to watch, and it really genuinely makes me happy. So if you already have Apple TV, go and watch that. Thanks for watching, especially if you joined in and rated the chants I made up. Also, hopefully you weren't too harsh on them, but I had a lot of fun making them either way. And if you like them, go out and sing them. It would be amazing if one of them caught on. If you came up with any chants because of this or just in general, leave those in the comments too. It'd be fun to see what people came up with. If you like this video, please like this video, and if you want to see more, you should subscribe. If you have a question I should answer, let me know in the comments, and if you know someone who'd enjoy this video, why not send them a link. Bye.